Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating area, the English vocabulary used in psychology and mental health.
It's quite something, isn't it? This field gives us such specific ways to talk about how we feel, think, behave, things that can often seem quite vague otherwise.
Exactly, and when you get a handle on these words, it just makes communication clearer, about our inner experiences.
Yeah.
And helps understand mental well-being on a deeper level.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, we've got quite a collection of terms covering everything from like the subtleties of emotions to the language for mental health conditions, therapies, even how our minds process information.
So the goal today is really to pull out the most useful, maybe the most interesting bits of this vocabulary.
Right, make it accessible, make it relevant for you listening.
It's interesting how psychology gives us a much more precise way to talk about emotions beyond just, happy or sad.
Definitely. Like take euphoria. We hear that word, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Well, it's basically intense happiness or excitement, really intense.
Okay, so picture someone getting amazing news, like a big scholarship.
Yeah, exactly. They might feel this huge rush of euphoria.
It's often described as quite fleeting, though, right? Short-lived.
Often, yes. It can be linked to these big positive events or sometimes, in a clinical sense, periods of elevated mood, like in bipolar disorder.
Right, so imagine that student who just got into their dream university. They might say they feel euphoric, just bursting with joy about it.
Mm-hmm. And for pronunciation, it's just shutter.
Just got it. Because it's so intense, it's probably a word you'd use kind of carefully.
Probably.
Yeah.
You might add modifiers like overwhelming euphoria or a moment of euphoria to give it context.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe, for listeners, try thinking about a time you felt that way. Might help nail down the meaning.
Good idea. And it's interesting that feeling is often tied to brain chemistry, like dopamine release.
Ah, okay. Powerful, but temporary.
That transient nature is key. So shifting gears, maybe to the other end of the spectrum.
Okay, like melancholy.
Melancholy, yeah. What's interesting here is the depth, the sort of moodiness of it.
Right. It's defined as this deep sadness or gloom, but often without a really specific cause, isn't it?
Exactly. It feels more introspective than, say, despair. It can be linked to nostalgia, maybe, or just a vague sense of loss.
I can picture that. Like a character in a book looking at old photos, feeling that bittersweet longing. That's melancholy.
That's a perfect example, and it can also be a symptom of depression, clinically speaking.
Okay, pronunciation.
It's melancholy.
Melancholy.
The line saying Creole. Seems like a great word for descriptive writing. How would you distinguish it from just sad?
I think by emphasizing that reflective quality. You might say a touch of melancholy or a melancholic mood.
Gotcha. Historically, wasn't it linked to, temperaments and creativity?
It was, yeah. Believed to be linked to the black bile humor and sometimes associated with artistic temperaments. Quite a history to that word.
Fascinating. Okay, moving on to something very common. Anxiety. Ah, yes, anxiety. And what's notable here is how broad this term is, how widely it applies.
It really is. It's that feeling of worry, nervousness, unease. Usually about something uncertain coming up.
And it exists on a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
From mild jitters to something really debilitating.
Definitely. And it's also a clinical term, like in generalized anxiety disorder, GAD.
So a student might say, I'm feeling so anxious about my exams. That's a common usage.
Absolutely. Pronunciation is aishi. It's super versatile, this word, used every day, used formally, and the adjective form anxious is common too.
Right. I'm anxious about the presentation, though sometimes anxious can also mean eager, which is a bit confusing.
True. Context is key. It might help to try using it in sentences describing specific triggers, like you said, the exams, the presentation.
And it's worth remembering, while everyone feels anxious sometimes, an anxiety disorder is different. It's about the intensity, how long it lasts, how much it interferes with life.
Good distinction. Okay, next up, empathy. This feels fundamental to connection.
It really is. What's so significant about empathy is that shared feeling aspect.
So it's the ability to understand and share someone else's feelings.
Exactly. Understand and share. It's a cornerstone of emotional intelligence and obviously crucial in therapy.
You need that connection.
Yeah.
And it's different from sympathy, right?
Yes, that's a key distinction. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is more like feeling with them, understanding their emotional state from their perspective.
Okay, so a therapist might say, I can see how painful this must be for you. That's showing empathy.
Precisely. The pronunciation, his myth.
Meth. Seems really important for discussions about relationships, social issues.
Definitely. Maybe try contrasting it with sympathy in a sentence to get the feel for it.
Good exercise. It's amazing how it involves both intellectual understanding and, emotional resonance.
It does. Okay, then we have apathy, which is kind of the opposite of strong feeling.
Right, a lack of emotional engagement. What's interesting is its connection to other states sometimes.
Yeah, apathy is a lack of interest, enthusiasm, or concern. It often shows up as a symptom of depression or burnout.
Like a kind of detachment.
Exactly. But it can also just describe a neutral stance in some situations, not necessarily clinical.
Okay, so you might describe a colleague as apathetic if they show zero effort in a team project.
That's a possible use, yes. The pronunciation is tuthrakle.
Yusothrake. So you can use it to describe disengagement in different areas, personal motivation, work, even wider societal things.
You might use phrases like marked by apathy or a general sense of apathy.
Maybe trying a quick dialogue where someone accuses another of apathy could help practice it.
Could work.
Yeah.
So clearly, having this nuanced vocabulary helps us express ourselves much better, understand that whole spectrum of human feeling.
Yeah, and remembering the related forms too, like anxious, empathetic, apathetic, as flexibility.
So if we connect these emotions to the bigger picture of mental health, we get into terms for specific disorders. And here, using the terms accurately and sensitively is really vital.
Absolutely crucial. Understanding this vocabulary is key for talking about diagnosis, treatment, how society sees these conditions, everything. Should we start with depression?
Sounds good. Depression. Medically, it's a mental health disorder. Key features are persistent sadness, loss of interest, low energy.
Right, major depressive disorder. It's unfortunately very common, affects mood, behavior, even physical health, often needs therapy, maybe medication.
So you might hear a friend confide, I think I might be struggling with depression. That requires a sensitive response.
Definitely. The pronunciation. The deeper,
Deeprim.
and because it's a clinical term, got to use it carefully, not just for feeling a bit down.
Exactly. And related words are depressed for the state or depressive as an adjective. Maybe writing about the symptoms formally could help fix its meaning.
Good tip. It affects so many people. Understanding the terminology is important.
Okay, moving on to bipolar disorder. The key thing here is the mood swings.
Right. Bipolar disorder involves extreme shifts in mood, periods of mania, high energy, sometimes impulsivity, and periods of depression.
It requires careful management, usually medication and therapy working together.
So in a psychology class, someone might ask, how is bipolar disorder different from just being moody?
Yeah, a common question. The pronunciation is bezpolo.
Besipoflir. It's a term you hear more in academic or clinical settings. Related terms like mania or hypomania, which is a milder form of mania, come up too.
Maybe creating a dialogue where someone explains their experience could be a useful exercise for learners.
Good idea. And the key difference from regular moodiness is the extremity and the impact on functioning, right?
Precisely. Far more pronounced and disruptive.
Okay. Then there's schizophrenia, a term that unfortunately carries a lot of stigma.
It really does. And it's vital to remember it's a serious, complex brain disorder.
Yeah. It features distorted thinking, sometimes hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that aren't there, and delusions, which are fixed false beliefs.
It really impacts how a person perceives reality. Their cognition can lead to social withdrawal. It's just so often misunderstood.
Definitely. You might see a documentary saying how schizophrenia affects a person's relationships. The pronunciation is tricky. Schizophrenia. Probably best used in formal contexts, like discussions about mental health or stigma, and definitely avoid using it casually to mean erratic or unpredictable. That just fuels stereotypes.
Absolutely. Approach this term with sensitivity, understanding the real challenges involved.
Okay. Another often misunderstood one, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD.
Yes. And the important thing here is it's not just about liking things neat and tidy.
Right. OCD involves unwanted, intrusive thoughts. Those are the obsessions and repetitive behaviors or mental acts, the compulsions that someone feels driven to perform.
And these obsessions and compulsions are distressing, they take up time, they interfere significantly with life. It's not just being a perfectionist.
So a character on TV might say, my OCD makes me check the locks 10 times before I can leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pronunciation. Obsessive compulsive cancelsums.
Got it. Important to use it accurately. Learn the related terms. Obsession, compulsion, Maybe writing a short empathetic story about someone with OCD could deepen understanding.
That's a great suggestion. The key is that distressing, intrusive nature of the thoughts and the disruptive compulsions.
Right. Lastly for this section, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
Yes, PTSD. And the essential thing is that it's triggered by experiencing or witnessing significant trauma.
Okay, so it's a condition that develops after a traumatic event. Leads to things like flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety.
Exactly. Common among survivors of abuse, accidents, combat, natural disasters, various traumas, affects memory, emotions, even physical reactions.
So a therapist might say, let's work on coping strategies for your PTSD symptoms.
Pronunciation. Post-traumatic. Post-traumatic post.
Okay. Use it in discussions about trauma. Related terms like trauma, flashback are key too. Maybe writing about the effects of PTSD could help understand its complexity.
Good idea. And just to reiterate, for all these disorder terms, accuracy and sensitivity are paramount. Avoid casual misuse that perpetuates stigma.
So important. Okay, let's shift focus now. What about the language around getting help? Psychological therapies and interventions.
Right. This vocabulary is key for talking about recovery and support. And what's striking is just the range of different approaches available.
Definitely. Let's start with a common one. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Ah, yes, CBT. It's a type of psychotherapy, a talking therapy that helps people identify and change negative or unhelpful patterns of thinking and behaving.
It's very evidence-based, isn't it?
Yeah.
Used for lots of things like depression, anxiety, OCD.
Highly evidence-based, it focuses on that link between thoughts, feelings, and actions, how they influence each other.
So a therapist might say, I recommend CBT to help you manage these panic attacks.
Exactly. The pronunciation of cognitive is spenhognitive.
Cognitive. So CBT, good term for discussions about therapy options, maybe writing a little therapist-client dialogue explaining it.
Could be useful. At its heart, it's about identifying those unhelpful thoughts and learning skills to challenge or change them. Very practical.
Okay. What about psychoanalysis? That sounds older school?
It is, historically speaking. Psychoanalysis is a method that really delves into unconscious conflicts and past experiences, especially early childhood, to understand present behavior.
So this is Freud's territory.
Primarily, yes. Developed by Freud, it often involves long-term therapy exploring the unconscious mind. Less common in its pure form today, but hugely influential.
Right. The psych student might write about how psychoanalysis views the unconscious as shaping personality.
Exactly. The pronunciation, psychosis.
Psychosis. Okay. Use it in academic context, maybe? Related terms, unconscious, Freudian slip, that kind of thing.
Yes, and comparing it to CBT in an essay could highlight the very different approaches, past focus versus present focus, for example.
Interesting contrast. Okay, then there's mindfulness. This feels very current.
It's gained a lot of traction, definitely. Mindfulness is essentially the practice of focusing your attention on the present moment, intentionally and non-judgmentally.
Sounds simple, but maybe not easy.
It takes practice. Its roots are in Buddhist meditation, but it's widely used now in therapy for stress, anxiety, depression.
Through techniques like deep breathing, body scans, meditation.
Exactly. A yoga instructor might say, let's cultivate mindfulness by really focusing on the sensation of our breath.
Right. Pronunciation. Alleen soos Ellen dois.
Elapels affelnuns. Good term for discussions about stress management, well-being. Maybe journaling about a mindfulness exercise could help grasp it.
Good practical application. It's interesting how powerful just paying attention to the present without judgment can be.
Yeah. Okay, another therapy, exposure therapy. Sounds a bit intense.
It can be, but it's very effective, particularly for anxiety disorders like phobias, PTSD, and OCD. The key is gradual confrontation.
So it involves slowly, safely facing the things or situations you fear. Precisely. To reduce the anxiety associated with them, it works by desensitization, helping you become less sensitive to the fear trigger through controlled exposure.
Okay, so a therapist treating social anxiety might explain, we'll use exposure therapy, starting with small steps, to help you feel more comfortable in social situations.
That's the idea. The pronunciation of exposure is exispoen.
Exispoen. Use it when talking about phobias, maybe. Writing a fictional case study about someone undergoing it could be insightful.
Could be. The principle is that repeated safe exposure weakens the fear response over time.
Makes sense. And finally, group therapy.
Yes, group therapy. This highlights the power of peer support. What's notable is the shared experience.
So it's where several individuals meet together, usually with a therapist facilitating, to share their experiences and support each other.
Exactly. It leverages that peer support for issues like addiction, grief, social anxiety, many things. Knowing others face similar struggles can be very powerful.
Yeah, less isolating. A counselor might say, group therapy can really help reduce feelings of loneliness.
Good term for discussions about community support systems. Maybe writing a short script for a group session could help practice its use.
Lots of different approaches then, and these terms pop up everywhere, right? Self-help, wellness discussions.
They do. So understanding the technical definitions, but also the kind of cultural context is valuable.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift one last time to how the mind itself works, the vocabulary around cognitive processes.
Right. This is about the mechanics of thinking, memory, attention, that sort of thing. Fundamental stuff.
Let's start broad. Cognition.
Okay. Cognition basically refers to all the mental processes involved in knowing, understanding, remembering, problem solving, and communicating. Attention, memory, language use, learning. It's the umbrella term.
So cognitive psychology studies all of that.
Pretty much. A researcher might say, we're studying cognition in older adults to understand age-related memory changes.
Got it. Pronunciation. Ink.
Yeah.
Good for academic use. And the adjective cognitive is everywhere. Cognitive skills, cognitive decline.
Very common. Writing about factors that influence cognition, like sleep, stress, exercise, could be a good exercise.
Okay. Next. Perception.
Perception. This is about how we interpret the sensory information coming in, how we make sense of our environment.
And it's subjective, right? What I perceive might be different from what you perceive.
Exactly. It's influenced by our past experiences, our emotions, our expectations, even our mental state. Biases play a role too.
So a psychologist mediating a conflict might ask, how did your perception of the event differ from theirs?
Good example. Pronunciation.
Sie mensen.
Useful in discussions about observation viewpoints. Maybe write about how perception shapes our reality.
Interesting prompt. Our brain is actively organizing and interpreting sensory data. It's not just passively receiving it.
Right. Then, big one, memory.
Huge! Memory is our ability to encode, store, retain, and then later recall information and past experiences.
Core function. And there are different types, aren't there? Short-term, long-term, working memory. Yes, several distinctions. It's absolutely crucial for learning, but also for our sense of self, our identity.
You hear people say things like, I have a terrible memory for dates, but a great memory for stories.
Common experience. Use memory in all sorts of contexts, casual and academic. Related terms. Recall, retention, encoding.
Maybe write a story about someone with an unusual memory, like photographic memory or amnesia.
Could be fun. Memory is an active process, not just like a filing cabinet.
Good point. Okay, attention.
Attention. This is the cognitive process of selectively concentrating on one aspect of the environment while ignoring other things.
Focusing. Essential for learning, getting work done. But it can be impaired, like an ADHD.
Right. A teacher might say, please pay attention to the instructions. Very common phrase.
We talk about divided attention, sustained attention. Practice using those phrases maybe. Or write a dialogue about a child having trouble paying attention in class.
Good ways to practice. Our ability to filter out distractions is key to effective attention.
Okay, last one in this section. Bias.
Bias. This refers to a tendency, often unconscious, to favor or interpret information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or experiences.
So it can skew our thinking.
It can. Cognitive biases, like confirmation bias, looking for info that confirms what we already think, or anchoring bias, relying too heavily on the first piece of info, affect our decisions, our perception.
They're studied to understand why we sometimes think, well, illogically.
Pretty much. In a discussion about fairness, someone might say, we need to be aware of our own biases to make objective judgments.
Right. Pronunciation. Das sextos.
Sextos.
Useful for discussions about critical thinking, fairness. Related to prejudice, though bias is broader. Maybe write about spotting cognitive biases in everyday life.
Very illuminating exercise. So all these terms from emotions to cognition, they're not just academic, they really enhance our ability to talk about our mental lives.
Absolutely. Understanding this specialized vocabulary from psychology and mental health is like getting a better toolkit, isn't it? For expressing yourself, for understanding the complexities of the mind.
It really is empowering. From the fine details of emotions, to descriptions of mental health challenges, to how we actually think and perceive, these words offer valuable insights.
We really encourage you to keep exploring these terms, notice how they're used, and see how they help understand ourselves and others better.
Definitely keep exploring.
And if you found this deep dive useful, please do like this video, share it with others who might benefit, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel for more language explorations like this one.
Thanks for tuning in.